Warning, the Stone Age Gamer includes a lot of bad language. Cover your mother***ing ears.
Good evening and welcome to the Stone Age Gamer Podcast. I'm Kris Randazzo and joining me tonight is Emu Farmer Dan Ryan.
Love a good emu joke.
Who doesn't? I don't love bad emu jokes like those stupid Liberty Mutual commercials or whatever company. I hate insurance companies. Anyway, this week, Dan and I had a chance to chat with the author Matt Adams about his new book, Sega CD Summer. What did we think? How much of the book was actually about video games? I hope you like baseball because the Stone Age Gamer Podcast starts now. Hello, everyone. This is episode 436. It is the week of November 11th, 2022. And yes, I did finally remember to update the date on my script, so I didn't have to say the wrong dang thing. How you doing, Dan?
Oh, man. It's been a long couple of weeks, Kris. I'm tired.
Yeah, I'm whooped, too. I tell you, this is the last day of my staycation, and I didn't play an ounce of Stray.
You're a terrible person. I want you to know that.
That was my goal. I wanted
Here
to
in
play
front of
Stray.
God and country.
And I
did
none of it. I didn't even turn on my PlayStation 4. I've played a few things. The first couple of days was just work but not work. It was like calling the doctor's office and arguing with insurance companies. It was having a whole online argument with Spirit Halloween because they refused to help me on the inflatable I bought for Karen last year's. It was just work. It was just work stuff that wasn't work stuff. And then on Wednesday, I finally decided, all right, I'm going to do something. I'm going to not work today. I'm just going to relax for a little bit. That's the plan anyway. So let's try and chill out. And I've put some time into Pilot Wing 64, which has been great. I marathoned the new season of Dragon Prince that just dropped.
Is that any good?
I love that show. And the new season was just as good as the old seasons. It's finally answering some more questions. And so hooray for that. No, freaking love that show. And I started reviewing. I got a new game for review for Nintendo Force. It's called Haiku the Robot. I'm like maybe about 20 minutes into it. It's okay so far. It's interesting. But yeah, that's and that was what I did Wednesday morning. Was I sat down and I dropped the kids off at school, and then I came home and I laid down on the couch and I finished this freaking book.
Nice.
I was like, this is what I'm doing with my time this morning. I'm going to finish this goddamn book because we're interviewing the author on Friday. So I better have it done by then. He gave it to me quite a while ago, and I'm sure Dan's already finished it.
He did, in fact.
And I did. And it was a really good book. I friggin' liked it. So we already did the interview, right? We're going to cut to the interview, and I'm going to sound a little, filleting, I guess. That's the right word. Because there was a lot of, I really did. I mean every word of that I said in the interview. Like things about the book, I found very impressive. And if you like books, then you should get this one. It's rectangular. It's 4 pages.
There's some words on them.
Yeah,
great.
It is. There's a lot of baseball in it, and I don't mean that as a bad thing. Like, you'd think it might be misleading that it's called Sega CD Summer, but it's really not, because it is absolutely about that. It's just so much of it isn't really Sega CD. It's about what the kid had to go through to get the Sega CD. And
yeah, it does such a damn good job of capturing that feeling that most of our listener base, I feel, is around the same age, and you can identify with it. And even if you weren't a baseball player, right? Like, just the fact of kids struggling to accomplish something and wanting to win. Like, there's a lot of entry points for the reader in the story, and it's just a good story.
Yeah, it's a good story, and he's a good dude. This Matt fella was a lot of fun to talk to.
Hey, he was all right.
Did you have anything you wanted to jump in? Wanted to throw on here before we cut away to the interview?
Yeah, we are T-minus 7 days from Ragnarok, and I am fucking excited. I might not do the podcast next Friday.
I hear it's quite good.
It's
also getting all the reviews.
What I hear.
Yeah. It's reviewing quite well. I've been thinking a lot about Game of the Year stuff. And I have too,
man.
I got some weird thoughts on this is not where I thought I was going to be at the end of this year, but here we are.
Daddish 3 was going to be your Game of the Year over Kirby?
I'm not saying that that's the case, but I'm saying that the thought has crossed my mind. I will also say that I feel like there's a couple, like, I didn't play Shovel Knight Dig yet, and
sure,
that's a money concern for me. It's like I just don't have money to spend on anything right now. But I'd really like to play that one before the year's up. We'll see how the holidays go. If maybe it'll go on sale for 15 minutes or something like that, if I can get it for a good price. But like, I really wanted to play Shovel Knight Dig, and I also am 99% sure I'm not going to get to Bayonetta 3 before the year is over. And
sure,
Splatoon 3 just hasn't excited me enough to buy it. Like, I feel like I'm going to get it one of these days. I think at some point they're going to release single player DLC for it, and that's what I'm going to do when that happens. But yeah, it's been a weird year for video games. But like I mentioned on the show, I counted all the games I've beat this year, and it's quite a lot. And knocked some big names off my list that have always been like, I should really play through that game. And apparently one of those games that I really need to play is Knights of the Old Republic, so I should make that happen. But anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get ourselves to the interview with Matt Adams, so enjoy. Hi, everyone. We're here with Matt Adams from Earth?
Indianapolis, Earth.
Wow. So good. Well, such a professional start.
It just immediately dawned on me, like, yeah, I'm here with blank from the Atari, some podcast, or blank from somewhere else. I'm like, blank from, the bookstore. Matt Adams, he's an author. And he wrote a book called Sega CD Summer, and I read it cover to cover, which is not something I do
shockingly
with a ton of
rare
books.
For you.
And I have to say that I really we'll get to the major interview stuff in a second here, but I will just say I very much enjoyed this book. So much so that I'm considering trying to put a little more effort into reading other books. I am.
It's like the author wet dream right there. Like you've converted one, Matt.
Hey, that's
it's
what we aim
entirely
to
possible.
do.
I'm
not
not
encourage reading.
I'm not saying I'm there yet, but I've been on a real deep dive Star Wars kick lately, and I've been considering trying to pick up some of the canon novels and maybe give them a try, because I really did enjoy having this book around. It took me a long time to read it because I can't read a lot before I start falling asleep. It's just a thing with me. Unless I'm reading a comic book, no matter how interested I am in something, the act of reading tends to make me drowsy. But I made it through, and it was quite a good time. But anyway, so Matt, how did you find us?
Well, I was I wrote this book, and it was about retro video games. It's about a lot of other things, but retro video games is kind of one of the main thrusts of the book. And so I was kind of looking through, I looked through some different retro video game YouTubers. I looked through some different podcasts, listened to some different podcasts, and then I thought, well, I'm going to reach out to some of them, see if they would be interested in, talking about the book, because that's kind of the target audience is probably people, between the ages of, especially guys, between the ages of 35 and 50, those who've grown up on Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, those who would have played youth baseball. And you guys kind of punched some of the tickets there. So, here we are.
You found our Sega CD episode, right? Was that the one you commented on when we did the Sega CD starter kit? Or was that a different one?
Because to be honest, and I have listened to a lot of retro gaming podcasts in the last couple of months, and they all start to blend together to a point.
No, I understand
as far as who's talked about what. And so I do like your guys' starter kit stuff. I did hear one about, did you guys do Neo Geo Pocket?
Yeah.
Recently.
That was recent.
And there was another one, maybe Dreamcast. That was, I don't know if that was a recent one or if it's just one that I happened to listen to while trying to, vet these podcasts, make sure that they were going to be appropriate, for something. Not that they were going to be appropriate to be on or anything, but that, it would be content that you guys would be interested in.
Gotcha.
I do appreciate that we passed the vetting. That is not the thing I would expect for myself and for Mr. Chris.
Well, and then there's also the fact that you guys actually responded to the emails, so that also helped.
That is what we keep telling people, like, send us emails. We'll talk to you. We have no shame.
Talk to everybody.
Yeah, I love everybody. I've never met a stranger. I will say, it hurts a little. I know it's accurate, but it hurts a little to say readers between the ages of 35 and 50. Like, that doesn't feel great. I know, I understand. But I'm gonna need a minute with that.
Dude, yeah, no, I was born in 1980, so I'm 42, and it does not make sense that that's the case.
It's stupid.
And, and basically, part of the reason is that I use that age group, not so much for the retro video game part, because I think that's something that can go a lot of different age ways, but it's really... There's a lot of baseball in this book, for better or for worse. And I just don't think that people that are a little bit younger than us appreciate how important baseball was to Summers. And so that's why for that segment of the population, I think that I kind of target that age range. Because for a lot of us growing up, summer baseball was a thing. Not for everybody. I'm not saying it was for everybody, but it was definitely, I think, more of a focus for kids when I was growing up than for the kids that are growing up right now.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. And I think too, one of the things that you mentioned in the book a couple of different times too, and I think what makes us a good target audience for it, like our listeners, other people around our advanced ages, is that they're real, like, that the promise of what the Sega CD was, not the actuality of what the Sega CD was, but the promise, that future of gaming, like, everything is just available now, right? Like, you can play retro games, you can jump on Roblox. Like, my kid just went dressed as a character from a Roblox game that she's super into, and, like, showed me a picture of what the Roblox game was, and, like, they're doing really incredible things on Roblox now. Like, there's just such this amazing availability of things that the promise of that jump in technology just doesn't exist for the younger generation the way it did for us. No,
yeah, because you're right. They've got everything. They've got microtransactions. Congratulations for that. But they've got basically interactive movies. They've got realistic graphics. Sports games look great. Everything looks great. And like you said, then also they can watch and play the games from the past as well. It's just a smorgasbord. But for us, we had 8-bit graphics, and then we went to 16-bit, and we're like, wow, that's a step up. And so we're thinking, wow, we've got interactive movies, and, then we got Sewer Shark out of it, which I know that it's got its fans, but that was the pack-in game that I got with my Sega CD Model 2, and I was underwhelmed by Sewer Shark. We'll just say that.
Yeah, you're not alone on that. I can't remember who...
It's not an ideal pack-in title, in retrospect.
I remember somebody I knew had gotten the Sega CD, and... I'm a Nintendo guy. I always have been. And like, which was to my detriment to a degree, like, in hindsight, when I got older and realized that, video games are video games, just obsessing over one to the, and just never even touching the other ones. That's just a foolish way to miss out on a bunch of good games. But, I remember back then, when the Sega CD came out, I wanted to see what it was all about, and a friend of mine got it, and they got Sewer Shark with it, and it was really similar to that chapter in the book where you talked about it. It's, boy, this sure looks neat, but it's not much of a game. It's just nothing there to do. And that was kind of my general feeling about the Sega CD as a whole. I was like, all right, and Sonic CD doesn't seem like it's much more advanced than Sonic 3, really, or Sonic 2. It just seems like it's got a little higher quality music, but that's about it. So,
but it was still better than the 3DO. Just so much better.
The promise of what CD technology had to offer, that was one of the parts of the book that really resonated with me. Like when they went to the store and talked to the electronics boutique, there was an EB that you
yeah, I think it was EB, yeah.
And talked to that one guy that was like, and the mom was like, well, what about this thing? And he said, oh, this is going to be obsolete in a year or something like that. I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it was the 3DO.
It was.
Yeah, they talked about the 3DO and that it was super expensive, but there was going to be a price drop later in the year. And, have you sold any of these things for $700? He's like, oh, yeah, well, we sold some, but not many. And I assume that's kind of how it went with the 3DO.
Yeah, I had one friend who had the 3DO. His name was Joe. Joe Polisano had a 3DO, and that was he really liked that thing. Went to his house and played it once.
And we all laughed at him on the playground. We were like, all right, Joe, we get it.
It's kind of one of those things that if you watch some, retro gaming YouTubers and stuff like that, it seems that people have sort of reassessed the 3DO a little bit, but, the problem is really just the controller was not great. You daisy-chained it with other controllers to get your extra players, and then just the game library. While it had some good stuff, every game library has some good stuff. It just, it didn't compare to what you got on the other systems.
Yeah, for sure. And it's weird to try and go back to the 3DO now. I mean, I have mine hooked up just because I think it's a neat looking system, but I almost never go back to it because there's nothing that I really want to play on it that I can't play better elsewhere. Like when the 3DO was out, I remember being really into that had a great port of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Samurai Showdown was really good on it, but you can get arcade perfect versions of those now. So why go back to the 3DO for just about anything? It's not even as absurd as the CDI. Like I go back to the CDI a lot because like that thing's insane. That system is completely freaking bananas. And but you can't really say the same thing about the 3DO. It doesn't have the same breadth of bizarre games on its library. Like sure, it's got stuff like Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, but good luck tracking down a copy of that.
But also
funny.
maybe
I'm sure
they
you guys
should.
Oh, I'm sorry. You guys remember the 3DI, like the infomercials where they were trying to sell you the CDI.
The CDI infomercial. Oh my god!
With the
one with the big screen, and
yes.
It was the screen Phil. No, the guy's name was Phil, and I forget the name of the screen. But I used to watch that on Sunday mornings, and as a Nintendo fanatic, that was like, this is where I can see the next Zelda game. Like that was that Zelda game was in there. They showed Faces of Evil, and this is. A Link to the Past came out, and I think it was after Link's Awakening as well, but it was well before Ocarina of Time. Like this was the only place to get the new Zelda game, and it looked like it was a follow-up to Zelda 2, a game that I loved. I know a lot of people look at Zelda 2 and be like, that's a weird one, I don't love that game, but I loved Zelda 2. So this looked like they were following up on Zelda 2 and had all those animated sequences that looked a lot like the cartoon that was on the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. So as a kid, I'm looking at this like, I have got to have one of these. And naturally, my parents were just like, no, I'm not spending that kind of money on this. That no, just no. I eventually got one secondhand and got the Zelda games, and they're just as bad, if not worse, than most people say. But still, at the time as a kid, that infomercial was like every Sunday that it was on for must have been a good couple of months. I would just wake up and just watch that whole infomercial and be like, I gotta see what this voyeur game is when I'm older. And I own it. I've still never tried it, but I have it because it was on that infomercial. Oh, the CDI! What a system!
Oh, so bad, so.
But anyway,
bad.
back to your book. So, it really is a baseball book. Like, I was definitely taken aback by it. Earlier on when there was a lot of video game talk, I was like, I'm really, really, really digging the video game talk. It was really connecting with me. But as the book went on, it's really a baseball book, and it turned out that was some of the stuff that I wound up liking the most was the baseball. It was some of the paper route stuff was the stuff that didn't really like. I'd get to that point and be like, okay, well, can we get back to the video games of the baseball now? Because I'm really interested in the baseball. And like by the end of the book, when they were doing the whole, the equipment got stolen, was like, that was so heartbreaking. And then like they're doing the whole the what's the tournament called? I don't remember what it was called. They were playing against the yellow team or whatever. I didn't understand a lot of the minutia there because I'm not a sports guy, but I do
it's
like
just the
baseball.
end of the season league tournament. That's all that is. Yeah.
Right. And like the whole battle against that jerk kid who used to be his friend and is all smirky to him and everything. Like, you did such a great job of making me want to root for the main character in the book. And I Terry, right?
Tommy. Terry
Tommy.
was his dad.
Terry was his dad. Tommy. And how do you say that last name?
Guggenbiller.
Guggenbiller. Okay. That's what I thought. I was like, I just wasn't 100% sure. I'm not great at pronouncing names, but I was really invested in that by the end. And I kept expecting that bit where he hit he thought he hit the home run. I was just like, I sat up because I was reading on my couch and I sat up. I was like, oh, this is great. And then it turned out to be foul. And I was like, oh no, that was so not cool. But you did a really good job of making me care about that. And it's not that hard for me to care about baseball because I'm not a big baseball fan, like enough to follow it, but I do really enjoy watching the sport. I had never really read about it before, like reading it like a play-by-play of, here's the plot of a baseball game going through, and I found it captivating. So how much baseball did you do? How much of that? I know you went through in the end. You kind of like pointed out which bits were real and which bits were fake. But I'm drawing a blank on exactly how much of that baseball was your experience, and how into baseball are you? Into baseball are you now?
Well, I was more into baseball probably when I was a little bit younger, and the Cincinnati Reds were a relevant Major League Baseball team where they're not anymore. But, I played a lot of that stuff from Tommy Guggenbiller and his brother Craig, the baseball prodigy. It's a very loose understanding or loose translation or dramatization or fictionalization of, my brother and I playing baseball as kids. We played all the time from the time, we were really, really young up through high school. Summers were ruled by baseball. We practiced all the time. Took batting practice, shagged flies, so a lot of that experience from my real life gets poured into the book there. A lot of the game situations, not necessarily anything that I pulled from my real life, although it wasn't a tournament winning game, but we did have a kid on our team who wasn't very good. He was the kid that you had to put in the lineup because in order to play in the youth league, everybody had to have at least an at bat and play an inning out in the field. And we were up against it one game, late game situation, 2 outs, and we're like, well, we can all go home because we know this kid's going to strike out. And instead, he lines one into the gap, and we won the game. So, and we kind of take that experience with Jimmy Effin Jefferson there toward the end of the tournament there in the book.
I liked that quite a bit. The surprise there.
Well, yeah, it's not the most subversive thing, but we tried to do it a little because you would expect the main character, and I'm sorry for spoilers for those of you who would probably like to buy the book and now won't, but you tried to subvert a little bit because you would expect that the hero of the main character is going to step up and hit the home run and beat his arch nemesis at the end. So just tried to turn that around a little bit.
Well, I thought that was so nice too, because like having grown up, like you said, playing baseball, like playing football, not just organized like youth teams, but my buddy Nick and I, like the main thing we did together as friends, it was NHL 93 or 94 or whatever, depending on the year. But then we would play home run derby in the court, right? I grew up in a housing development, 550 fucking houses that all looked exactly the same except for the color of the shutters or whatever. Like your perfect 1980s, early 90s suburbia. And my buddy Nick lived in the court, right? Or the cul-de-sac, depending on where you live in the country. And we would sit, his driveway was home plate, and we would try to pepper tennis balls off of other people's houses. They would get so pissed at us, and looking back on it, it was such a jerk thing to do. Because we were getting, I don't know if this is something you did, Matt, but I know a lot of kids around where I grew up in New Jersey, we would go and we would get the wiffle ball bat. We would cut the bottom of the wiffle ball bat off, then stuff it with newspaper, and then use a lot of electrical tape around it to, make it more impactful. And we put different grips on it and all this stuff. And I mean, it got to the point where we were just, this lady that lived directly across the street from him, we were just knocking balls off of her siding just all summer long. and getting mad when she would yell at us. I'd be like, what are you yelling at us for? But that's baseball was such an important part of basically up until your book. The work stoppage really killed a ton of interest in the sport in America, and that it's McGuire and Sosa brought it back, certainly to a point, but not like it was.
No, yeah, I don't think the sport ever recovered from the '94 strike. We played our share of wiffle ball as well. We had about a half-acre backyard out in a kind of it's sort of a country area. Obviously, I live in a small town, and my brother batted on the left side of the plate. I was a right side plate, but our neighbor to our right side immediately had this huge fence. And so Greg was a lefty from the bat. So if he pulled one over that fence, it was a pain in the butt to go and retrieve. So we penalized him. Now, he was the better baseball player by far in the family, but we penalized him. So if he pulled one over that fence and we had to go get it, it was an out. So that was really not fair.
Not nice.
But we hated having to go over that fence to get the ball from our neighbor, who sometimes also had dogs. So that was his real limitation. Now, there was also a crabapple tree sort of in left center field, if you will, of where we played. If he hit one into the crabapple tree, which was a very short fence, kind of not really a fence, but you know what I mean. It was not a long way to go. If he hit one into the crabapple tree, then that was a home run. So that compensated for if you pull it over the fence, you're out. We didn't really get into wiffle ball in the book. It just didn't quite fit. But we played a lot of that when we were kids.
And is the Cincinnati Reds fandom accurate? That was your team?
Yeah, and they still are, kind of begrudgingly, because they just haven't been relevant for 2 decades. But
they really haven't. I mean, no. Jonathan India last year was like, all right, this kid looks like he's something. And then this year it was like, I mean, all right.
Yeah, he was okay. On and off the injured list, and they're just, they don't really tank in the MLB, but they're just not relevant right now. They made my dad pretty mad because they traded away a bunch of players after the end of last season, and to start this season, they were some of our favorite players, and they're just it's hardly even fun to watch. And then with streaming rights for trying to even watch baseball games right now are a complete mess. So it's very hard if you have Hulu Live or YouTube TV or anything like that. At least here in our market, you can't get the regional sports network. So it's just it's very hard to keep your fandom going because you can't even really watch the games unless you do workarounds like get a VPN and send it from your tablet to your TV. So it has definitely diminished kind of our fervor for the Reds, which is a shame because that's what we grew up on. Listen to Joe Nuxall and Marty Brenneman on the radio, but that's kind of where things are now.
Sports availability is a big freaking issue that confounds me to this day. I'm in southern New Jersey, so the Philly sports teams are really big around here. My mom is a Flyers fan. A bunch of my family are really big Philadelphia Flyers fans. And I really enjoy watching hockey. If there's one sport that I like watching more than anything else, it's hockey. And I made a concerted effort one year. It was I think it was 2 years ago. I said, all right, I'm going to try and be a Flyers fan this year. I'm going to try and follow the season. And the first game I tried to watch, I couldn't watch because it was not available on any of the TV services that I had. And that just kind of put the kibosh on that. My wife is a Steelers fan. She's from Pittsburgh, and she even got that NFL app that first a couple of years ago we did direct TV because that's the only way to get all the football games is to buy freaking direct TV and their football pass thing. But that expired.
It's very, very inexpensive as well, right?
I mean, it was at first, and then it became the first year. It was yeah, this is totally doable. But then after that promo ended, it was just an insane amount of money to watch to get football again the next year. So there's this NFL app that you can get where you can watch all the games on your phone, but you can't even actually watch all the games. Some of them are only available as audio. You can just listen to the radio broadcast of it wherever you are, which I suppose is something, and the same thing goes with baseball. When we were up in northern New Jersey, which is where I met my wife, she was a big a Yankees fan. That was the team that was where she was when she started getting into the sport, but she doesn't watch it anymore because you can't get the games that you want to get down here if you're not a Phillies fan. And even then, we're not in all of the Philly networks, so sometimes even that's not fully accessible. It's sports, I've noticed over the years, have become less and less accessible, and it drives me a little bonkers because sports are fun. I don't love rooting for a specific team. I just like watching the games, and the availability of the specific teams for all the people around me that like them has become rather obnoxious. And the same thing goes with video games. Remember when there used to be competition in sports games? And then Electronic Arts bought football, and then it just all cascaded downhill from there. Sports games have stagnated, and watching sports has become so much more difficult. It's no wonder that they're not as easy to get into. Just getting tickets to a game. I used to be able to go to a Yankee game every now and then when I lived in New York, and you can't even dream of that stuff now. Going to a baseball game costs an obscene amount of money, which is bananas. I'd love to take my kids to a pro baseball game.
That's why you got to do minor leagues, man. Minor leagues.
Yeah, we
did.
We did do a minor league game last year. We did, and the kids thought that was pretty cool. It's not quite the same, but it's still something.
Certainly.
Well, it's funny that you talked about the video games and how they had, competition amongst developers for the baseball license. I did leading up to the book, or after the book's release, I have done a series of blog posts about some of the different games that have inspired it, some of the different inspirations in my life, that some of the different characters, all these different things. There's a bunch of them at SegaCDSummer.com. There's the plug. And when I was looking at the baseball games, I mean, you had Tony La Russa baseball, you had the hardball series, you had the RBI baseball, you had World Series baseball. These are just for the Genesis, and Triple Play you had from EA Sports, and you had multiple hockey games, you had multiple basketball games, for better or for worse in some cases, but at least you felt like they were in kind of a competition against each other to make their games better. And man, now, I mean, at least for Xbox, I'm an Xbox guy now, and MLB The Show came out last year for the Xbox, and I was really excited about that because I hadn't had a good baseball game. I mean, I forget what there is a baseball game whose name escapes me right now. It's not officially licensed, but it was all right. It was okay, but Mega League Baseball, I think, was the one.
Yeah,
but to have an MLB baseball game back on a system that I played, because I've just not been much of a PlayStation guy after the PlayStation 1, was great. But when you had all these different games, it was a lot of fun, and you just don't have that anymore.
No, and it all started with Electronic Arts when Sega dropped NFL 2K, was it 2K2 or whatever? They were like,
2K5.
Our game is better, and we're going to prove it. We're going to sell it for $20. And everyone bought that thing. And they were like, wow, this is better than Madden. And Electronic Arts like, fine, we're going to buy football. And that just started this stupid arms race where Sega was like, all right, fine, then we'll buy baseball. And then, 2K was the only one that was allowed to be third party unless you were a first party developer was allowed to make baseball games. But the 2K series was it for baseball. And then they tried to do EA tried to do college baseball with MVP to at least keep the gameplay. And then Sega shut that down too. And then Electronic Arts bought college football to go along, and it just became this stupid arms race. And then only one company makes sports games, going forward, until we're starting to see the cracks in that now. Like, thankfully, soccer never fell into that trap completely, but FIFA stagnated pretty considerably, especially with these stupid legacy editions that they release. And Pro Evolution Soccer Winning 11 or whatever it's called now, that kind of fell off the rails. But you used to have all this, like, I remember working at Funko Land and being like, all right, well, here's Madden, here's Game Day, here's Blitz, and you got to choose your destiny. Here's Quarterback Club, and set them all up next to each other on the days they came out. And then
Quarterback Club?
Yeah.
Good God. I haven't thought of that game in forever.
Yeah, that was a thing that happened.
Acclaim did the Quarterback Club. They did All-Star Baseball. That seemed to do pretty well. Even Nintendo was making baseball games, the Griffey series and stuff.
So those are well thought of. And you mentioned earlier, that you were kind of more of a Nintendo guy than a Sega guy. And when you're a kid, that's kind of how you are. You just kind of pick your side, and that's what you stick with. And then when you get a little bit older, you realize how dumb that was. I never really played the Ken Griffey Jr. games, and the one that killed me, and this is mentioned in the book, was the Super Star Wars games. Those never came out on Sega Genesis. I love Star Wars, and I never played those things until like college, because we bought a Super Nintendo for $20 at a GameStop and got those games for like $3 each.
Those are good games. They're hard, though.
They are hard. They're balls hard, but they are good games.
It's weird. I am a Star Wars whore, but I have rarely gotten into Star Wars video games. Like, for some reason, being an absolute video game nutcase and a Star Wars fan, you know what? Not everything that Star Wars. The Book of Boba Fett wasn't great, but I fucking loved it because it's Star Wars. I'm a lunatic, but for some reason I can't make that Star Wars video game thing so rarely meshes for me so much that I'm like, yes. Like, Rogue Squadron really did it for me. Rogue Squadron 1 and 2 was great. TIE Fighter and X-Wing on PC, though I put a ton of time into those, but like the Super Star Wars games or the Star Wars for NES, like, I liked them, but I didn't love them like I loved other Star Wars stuff. Like, I liked Force Unleashed. I didn't love it. I didn't even love it enough to play the second one. I liked Jedi Fallen Order, but again, not enough to make me be like, well, now I've got to buy a PlayStation 5 so I can get the sequel. It's just, I'm waiting for that Star Wars game that really, really gets me. And it has not happened yet. What are your favorite Star Wars games?
Well, I did like Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight. I think was one for PC that I played a ton as a kid, when I was younger. And Dark Forces as well. I liked that. I kind of missed out on the Battlefront games, both the old version and the new version, just not something. I liked Episode 1 Racer. I know that's a weird... I had that for PC. I thought that was cool. A really fun game. The Rogue Squadron 3D for the PC, I had that one as well. Ones I never really cared for. I mean, I played the Super Star Wars games, and they really are good games, but they are really, really hard and not necessarily a fun, pleasurable thing to just pop in the afternoon. I was never a big fan of Shadows of the Empire. I know a lot of people like that one, but I thought it was awfully clunky.
Talking about videos, they were talking about the CDI video. Do you remember that Nintendo 64 VHS tape that they sent out? Did you ever catch that one?
That one's not ringing a bell, no.
So Nintendo Power mailed out a Change the System Nintendo 64 promo tape. And like it showed off the first footage of the 3 games they showed off were Mario 64, Pilot Wing 64, and Shadows of the Empire. And now as a Nintendo fanatic, I getting that VHS tape was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And they're showing off Shadows of the Empire. They're showing off the whole the fact that it's using the music from the movie, so it sounds like the movies. They're showing the whole Hoth thing, and you shooting the tow cables at the AT-ATs, and it was like, this looks crazy good. And then I actually played it for like 15 minutes and just gave the heck up. Like, I felt like I should love this game, right? But I just didn't, and I never read any of the books or any of the other various Shadows of the Empire things. But yeah, that game really didn't grab me either.
Yeah,
weirdly
no,
though, I am
I
currently
didn't.
back playing Pilot Wing 64 the first time because it showed up on Switch, and that game is as good as I wanted it to be when I never played it back in the N64 days. But that's neither here nor there.
And then of course Rebel Assault has sort of a mini, an extended cameo in the book where the
Yeah.
kid talks about Rebel Assault, and a lot of people are gonna narf on that game. They don't like it, but that was the one game that I felt like made that Sega CD purchase, because I did buy one when I was a kid. I used some paper route money to buy one. That did for me make it worth it. I did love Rebel Assault, although I later found out it was missing a level. And then also, I'm kid you not, if you played it on hard mode, it took off the targeting reticles on certain levels. And the graphics were so grainy that you couldn't tell what you were supposed to be shooting, and it was almost unplayable. So you had to play it on medium difficulty or lower in order to actually be able to play it, because you'd never get through the levels.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever played Rebel Assault on Sega CD, but I can imagine.
Just keep it that way. I think it probably stays better in my memory than it actually does as a video game.
The way you explained that in the book was, I absolutely love that. As a Star Wars nut and a Sega kid, not getting any of the Super Star Wars games, but then all of a sudden, Sega CD, the future of video games, welcome to the next level, is getting a Star Wars game, and it looks, in magazines, looks freaking great. I can imagine being in that situation. I was kind of a late bloomer to the Star Wars thing, and then when my parents finally showed it. It was the weirdest thing. I can't remember how old I was. It was like right after the THX releases. I was born in 81, so I'm around the same age as you guys.
Okay.
And it was right around
the
THX...
same age. Bitch, you're the same age. Fuck you.
No, I am younger and
It sounds
handsomer,
like you're
damn it.
so much younger.
I am
around
younger
the same
by
age as you
several
guys.
So there was around when the THX VHS releases came out, and my parents were talking about it or something, and they were like, and I mentioned to them, I've never actually seen Star Wars, and they both looked at me and like, what do you mean you've never seen Star Wars? How have you never seen Star Wars? I'm like, you're my parents. You never rented Star Wars. We never watched Star Wars. What do you want from me? And so they bought the VHS tapes and sat me down, and we watched all three of them like back to back to back, like 2 or 3 nights in a row. And I was like, that just blew my mind. I've been a bona fide Star Wars whore ever since.
It's the best thing I've ever seen.
Seriously, I love Star Wars. I've been on such a ridiculous Star Wars kick. I just recently, yesterday, the day before, I started rewatching Clone Wars, and like I came up with my own, not entirely my own episode order, because there's like the official episode order as opposed to like it was released, but the episodes are chronologically all over the freaking map for some stupid reason. So like, if you go to StarWars.com, you can see the actual episode order as it's supposed to be. Like there's an official order. And then my wife, after they announced the Ahsoka series, was like, I've never seen any Clone Wars stuff. What should I watch? And so I went through this entire series rewatch and went episode by episode and like, all right, this is unnecessary. This is unnecessary. Then I just kind of cut every season down to what I thought was like the important stuff to watch. So I'm watching it in my order now, and it is I'm really enjoying it. It was between Andor being really good and Tales of the Jedi came out, and I was like, well, this is great too. What the hell? And I'm just kind of like itching I just can't quite get enough Star Wars at the moment, and I'm all caught up on the comics, so I'm just waiting for new issues to come out and keep that going. And now I'm thinking about reading Star Wars books thanks to you getting me in reading. So
hey, some of the new canon stuff's pretty good. I'm trying to think of some off the top of my head. I've just finished Shadows of the Sith by Adam Christopher, which is one of the more recent ones that tries to put a link between, tries to improve upon the Rise of Skywalker and some of the plot points in that, which is going to be something that is going to be take it or leave it for some people. There's kind of it's not exactly like Rogue Squadron, but there's kind of a series of books that is kind of about a Shadow Squadron that is pretty good. I think it's a trilogy. I can't remember the author of that off the top of my head, but there's some good new Star Wars canon stuff. I would highly recommend some of them, and maybe if I weren't blubbering here while trying to do this podcast, I could think of some more. But maybe I'll send you a few that I liked.
The two that I was considering starting with, I don't know. I don't think I want to dive into the High Republic era. I don't think I'm ready for that in my life. Because I never played Knights of the Old Republic.
Which is such a crime.
I know, it's ridiculous.
My God,
but everyone talks that game so incredibly high.
That's because it is a great Star Wars game.
It is a great Star Wars game. It has a great reveal. Like one of those, I got to put the controller down and walk away for a couple minutes kind of things.
Like, people talked a lot of good stuff about a lot. People talked a really, really, really high game about Jedi Fallen Order, and that one was fine.
Yes, but just as a sidebar, Chris, right? And I know this isn't 100% an interview question, but how many games do you finish regularly? Almost none, right? If you're being honest.
I've actually been keeping track of that this year. I am currently, for this year, up to... Hold on a second. And now, here's a quick look at some of the other original content available now from our partners and Geekade.com. Hi everyone, Kris here. Podcast listening is free, but podcast creation is not. That's why the Geekade Patreon exists. In an effort to help us pay the bills, we've got a Patreon page set up where you can gain access to our monthly podcast topic schedule, get early access to many of our shows, and more. If you'd like to help support Geekade and keep these shows running week after week, head over to the Geekade Patreon page, linked in the show notes of this very podcast.
First up, Quick Change is a movie starring Bill Murray, Gina Davis, Cousin Eddie from Christmas Vacation, and features cameos from Stanley Tucci, Tony Shalhoub, just possibly the greatest name in the history of Hollywood, Tony Shalhoub, and features a scene where two dudes joust on bikes. This should be an all-time comedy classic about a clown robbing a bank, but does it capitalize on its excellent premise and cast? Well, Paul, Sean, and Kris spent some quality time with this movie and discussed what worked, what didn't, and probably a whole mess of other stuff that didn't really have anything to do with the task at hand. They want you, yes, you, the listener, to listen to them, whatever that means, and also to listen to them. They want you to miss them and listen to them. Don't miss A Theater Near You, Episode 20, Quick Change.
Next, Halloween may be over, but spooky video game music is always in style. I think I wrote this exact same commercial last year.
Cut and paste.
You'd think I could have cut. Yeah, I'm going to have to go back and check. Anyway, on a special bonus episode of the Waveback Podcast, Matt and I put together our annual spooky special to share some of our favorite Halloween-flavored tunes, as well as a handful of great listener recommendations. From Xenogears to the all-important Dadish 3, there's something for everyone. Be sure to check out Waveback episode 155, Spooky Special 8.
Finally, Kris, something I think we can all identify with. The transition from Halloween to Christmas, right? It's one that can leave your head spinning, as your local grocery stores probably had candy canes on their shelves before you could so much as muster a single trick-or-treat. I know mine did. I went back to buy my kid the Halloween mask that they had literally yesterday in the shop right today. Nothing but fucking them. Do you know What can help ease the transition during the brief window when Thanksgiving gets some small degree of attention? Do you? Do you know, Kris?
Is it cheese?
No, it's beer and video games, obviously.
Son of a bitch.
God, it was right there. On an all-new Bits and Brews, I pair the terrifying, legitimately, Alien Isolation, that game is fucking scary, with Hardywood's Gingerbread Stout. Why do these two work well together? Well, it's all about time. Speaking of which, take some time. Check out all my writings as the Geek Writer, linked to in the show notes or on geekade.com.
For all this and more from us and our partners, be sure to keep your eyes, you guessed it, on geekade.com.
The newly redesigned geekade.com.
Oh, yes.
Slimmer,
Geekade.
sexier, geekade.com. Sorry, Matt. This is kind of sidetracking, but
You guys are fine.
Larger point to make.
Sega CD Summer.com for those of you if we need to fill some.
No,
some
for real.
dead air time.
And we're going to get there. I have more questions about
I have
that.
beaten
I'm just
46
You're good.
games this year.
You've beaten how many?
46 games this year.
I mean, okay. This
I'm
year
feeling
is
pretty damn good about that.
no, sure. And this year is a bit of an anomaly for you, if you're
it is,
being
because
honest.
I'm putting more of an effort into finishing the games that I
Right.
want to finish. So,
And a lot of stuff that you're finishing is stuff like Dadish, which is not an 8 to 12 hour game, right? Like it's
that is true.
so. But
I've been
my
a little
my
all over the map, but yeah.
my larger point there was, as much as you say Jedi Fallen Order was fine, you did finish it.
I did, but I really had to make myself do it.
But you did.
But I did. All right, so all right, Knights of the Old Republic. That's going to move up a little higher on my list. It's on Switch. I should really give that a proper shot now that I'm in crazy Star Wars mode. But anyway, the books I'm looking at are Dooku Jedi Lost and Master and Apprentice. Those both seem to be very highly reviewed.
Yeah, those are both pretty good. Yeah.
I like things that try to make the prequels good because I don't
'Cause they're
care
not.
for them.
I still have trouble buying in on that. I'm glad that they're reassessed and that they're loved by a certain generation of Star Wars fans, but it's just I tried, but I'm just not there.
Yeah, there's cool stuff in them, like for sure. I personally think episode 1's the most watchable out of the 3, but that's not saying that it is a great movie, but it does have a degree of fun. But like after this, what was it, the Tales of the Jedi, the Dooku episodes, I was like, all right, I put on episode 2 in the background. It is my least favorite Star Wars thing ever is episode 2 Attack of the Clones. But I put it on in the background and I background watched it, and just because I really wanted to see him being introduced and him talking to Obi-Wan in that weird prison scene where Obi-Wan's floating around like a rotisserie chicken for no good reason. And it's just not good. It's so difficult to watch every scene that has Anakin Skywalker in it. But the stuff around it is genuinely good. Like Clone Wars, you take out all the crap episodes that don't do anything, and it's a really good watch. Like there's some really great stuff in there. I think Qui-Gon Jinn's a great character. So like I like the stuff that builds around and makes that mythology better. I just wish the movies themselves were better. And I can't wait for that stuff to happen to the sequels, because I genuinely like all 3 of the sequel movies. I think they're freaking great. I mean, I recognize the massive problems with especially Rise of Skywalker, but at the same time, I still freaking love them. And I'm really looking forward to the point where we get the surrounding media that makes, like, Sidious is back. We weren't leading to this, but guess what? Off camera, between movies, dude showed up again, had a big broadcast. Trust us, it was amazing. Like I
He's
was
been doing this the whole time.
It was the whole time. I was like, oh, really? Because I don't think he was. I'm when you're a kid and you look at stuff like that, like of course you buy that hook, line, and sinker. You're not thinking about how the studio is approaching things or who was writing what and how the directors got along. You're not thinking about any of that stuff. You're just like, oh no, Sidious is back. But me knowing what I know about how these movies were made, it's like it really kind of took a lot of the sting out of it, like, or it made it sting more. That's the word I'm looking for. Just how uneven that was. And again, I freaking love that movie. I freaking love that movie. I can't wait to see the rest of the stuff that really kind of packs around it and makes it all connect a little bit better. Because
it'll be nice to live in an era sometime, maybe, I don't know, 20 years down the road, where you can say you liked the Rise of Skywalker, not have to feel like you live in a closet on that.
Oh my God, yeah.
I love the Rise of Skywalker. I will fight people. That movie is a good movie.
It was a good time. It was a really good time. And man, people are still so angry about those sequel movies and the direct comparisons to the prequels. Because, like, we lived through the prequels. We lived through those movies coming out, and people hated those movies with good reason. And I was one of those lunatics that defended them for the longest time. I deluded myself into thinking they were good and convincing myself they were good. And then every time I watched them, I liked them a little bit less. But boy, oh boy, the love for the prequels now, the nostalgic, like, no, they're actually masterpieces. They're really freaking good. There's people saying that stuff about the Super Mario Brothers movie. Like, no, it's actually really good. It's
about
not
a movie they haven't seen.
You're allowed to like things that aren't good, but you don't come at me and say Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo's Super Mario Brothers is actually a masterpiece, because it's not. And
No.
And that's how. Sorry, side tangent. Can we talk about Star Wars? I won't shut the hell up. Books, video games. Yes.
Yes. Chris, shut up for a minute.
Good.
So,
Done.
what was the spark that you were like, all right, this is the story I've got to tell now? Like, I'm going to sit down and write this book.
Well, it's not really that interesting of a story, but I'll tell it anyway. Last around Christmas time last year, a little before Christmas, there was a movie adaptation of a book called 8-Bit Christmas.
Yeah.
And I watched that adaptation, and I read that book, and I thought it was really fun. It was about a kid. It's kind of basically a Christmas story, except you replace Red Ryder BB gun with a Nintendo Entertainment System. Mm-hmm. And I like Nintendo. I had an NES as a kid, but I was like, I would like to try to do a Sega version of that. And I can't just do Sega Genesis Christmas or Sega CD Christmas, because that's just too transparent. So how could you maybe try to translate that to your small town with a Sega system? And, then I came up with the title Sega CD Summer, and that was my jumping off point. So I had a first draft of that in a couple of months, and it ended up involving Sega Genesis. It involved my newspaper route that I had as a kid, and then, as Chris has mentioned a few times, a considerable amount of baseball as well. with the big point being that there's a kid who wants a thing, but there are obstacles to him getting that thing. And this one is, he's got to earn enough money from his paper route to do it, and he's got to make good on bets with his mom and his dad in order to get some extra money, so he'll actually have some games to play on it.
And you said in the little afterwards section there that a lot of it is semi-autobiographical, right? Based on real events. Like, what was that a concentrated effort that you made? Because one of the things that I really like about it is that the main character, right, our hero of the story is such an everyman character, right? Like, he was every kid, or seemingly, at least I resonated 100% with him. Of, this feels like the every kid in late 80s, early 90s. Like, did you look at those things in your childhood and know, like, oh, this is totally applicable to everyone, or everybody's going to identify with this? Or was there an effort to kind of change things to make him that kind of everyman hero?
Oh, there's a lot of me and Tommy Guggenbiller, just as there's a lot of my brother Greg and Craig, the baseball project. See how close, how you would never be able to associate those two characters,
never.
Greg and Craig. You'd never know. You'd never
It's
know.
like Obi-Wan to Ben, you know?
Exactly.
No one will
Just
ever figure that
never
out.
figure it out.
Very sleight of hand.
But so the Tommy character definitely has a lot of mirrors with me, except I think he's probably definitely an idealized version that, as you said, is more of an everyman type of kid. You know, that was kind of the intent of him. So yeah, he borrows a lot of the traits I had from a kid, but everything is kind of taken to the extreme on that to kind of dramatize things a little bit.
Right, like really the only thing he was missing from the 80s, 90s archetype is like a skateboard. Was it? Were you not a skater?
I was not a skater boy.
See, well,
no.
that's what it is. You know, like that's the one thing.
And that wasn't that, you know, probably maybe growing up in a more rural area.
Sure.
That was, you know, rollerblading and skateboarding were not, while they were extreme, that was not really, you know, we were too busy, you know, walking through cornfields and cow tipping. So
yeah, not a ton of skateboarding down the old cow pasture.
I liked very much that he was a good guy, though, and it was really easy to root for him because I have a 9-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. And my 9-year-old son has been reading a bunch of books that have been thrown in his general direction, and a lot of those books that portray kids around a certain age as just awful human beings,
like just flat out monstrous.
Well, that sounds like a good model for the kids.
We've been reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and the main character of those books is absolutely horrible. He's just a horrid, selfish, self-centered, terrible kid. And we're reading these books like these come recommended, like that the adults think kids should be reading this, and like what idea does this give people about school? And there's no positivity in it at all. Like there's no one is trying to be a good person in that book. And I forget what the name of the other one is, but it's a really similar situation where like this kid's older brother is just pure evil. And that stuff is kind of like glorified. And I was talking to my wife about it, and she says that her guess is that it was fiction books written for little boys. And that's just not something that there was a ton of for the longest time. It was like girls read, boys play video games. And so I guess there's that, but the whole time I'm reading this, I'm like genuinely rooting for him to get his Sega CD, and he was good to his friends. He was loyal. He cared about his parents. He cared about doing the right thing, and that stuff I really enjoyed that about the book was just how easy it was to root for him to succeed.
Well,
even more than go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I feel like that we see a lot of books and stories, you know, about kids who have a fractured relationship with their dad and that sort of thing, and may not get along with their parents, or may not get along with their brother, and not that, you know, Tommy and his brother got along great all the time, 100% of the time, but, you know, I wanted them to be a nice, cohesive family that cared about each other, and I'm glad that came through in the book.
It very much did, and it was very appreciated.
Yeah, it definitely does. There's a lot of children's literature, right? I have twin daughters that are 13, and a lot of the books that they read, or things that are recommended like for 13-year-old kids, are just these awful dystopian, you know, because that's what's popular and that's what sells right now. You know, the Hunger Games kind of really kicked that off and pushed it in that direction. And then there was the Divergent series, with a lot of just sad dystopia, very gray. Everything's very gray. It's kind of like video games, like in the early 2000s. It's very like Gears of War. Everything is just Gears of War and just awful. And I agree. Like, it was really nice to just read this kind of throwback story of just a good kid, right? Like, and is that what were your influence, or what are your influences as a writer? Like, does any of that come from stuff that you like to read or people that you respected?
I don't really have any other authors that I read as kids that really inspired. I was just trying to write something that was, I guess more. I mentioned 8-Bit Christmas, A Christmas Story. Those in general, those were pretty good kids that were involved in those books. So Tommy's kind of my version of that, I suppose. And yeah, so that's kind of where we went with that.
What led you to, like, because this is not the first book you've written, right? You've written 2 or 3 others, I believe.
I had a couple of comedic superhero books that were released by a small press back in 2012, so it's been a while since I've had anything out. And I write quite a bit. This is going to sound like a humble brag, so I don't really mean it to come off that way.
That's
but
like this show.
I've finished. I have 20 completed novels that I've written over the years that I have taken writing seriously. And I still try to do those things the traditional way, try to get them to literary agents and stuff like that. But this book came pretty fast to me, and because this was such a book that was so close to me, because it takes place in my hometown, a lot of the characters are things that are inspired by things that that I grew up with. I just decided to do this one independently. So yeah, I've got some other stuff out there. And I'm hoping to have more. I would love to, be able to write for a living, but it's a hard, very competitive world to be in.
It is, for sure. I have one of my my cousin-in-law. I don't really care what the relationship is, for being honest. She's made a relative killing off of writing, like, steamy grocery store romance novels that she sells on Amazon for like $2-3 a pop, and like enough to where she was able to move out of Texas and like move to Amsterdam and whatnot. But she happened to just find an audience, right? Like, as you said, it's incredibly difficult to crack this world, and hopefully we can get you a couple sales at least with this interview here, because it's definitely a worthwhile read.
Well, and sure. I didn't feel like I have a couple of books that I feel are very commercially viable. I think they would appeal to a wide range of reading audience, age groups, that sort of thing, things that could maybe have a movie adaptation or something like that. This book, because the audience to me is pretty laser targeted, like I said, to just kind of that retro gaming crowd. And so that's why I thought I'd go ahead and publish it myself. And then I thought maybe if I could kind of target that audience through some podcast interviews, or maybe approaching some YouTubers that focus on retro gamers, that would be about the age group that I would target, that might be a different way to try to cultivate an audience out of that.
That's certainly an interesting approach. I wish you the best of luck. Just, I guess, make sure people know just how much baseball's in it. I definitely went in expecting it to be more video game focused, and like a part of me thinks it's like I almost feel like the title is misleading, but it's not. It is definitely a Sega CD Summer thing. It just, so much of the book was not about the actual playing of the Sega CD, and that's to my detriment a little bit. You get to writing these things, and I started out with the book about a kid that wants to get a Sega CD, and then suddenly it's it's the World Series there at the end. So sometimes that's what happens when you write a book, and it's pretty clear in the jacket copy that baseball is going to play a role in this. But I think you're probably right, Chris. I don't know that it's going to be clear how much of a role baseball is going to play in this book until you get a few chapters in. And like I said, maybe it needs to be called, I will tell you, I almost called this book My Sega CD in the Summer of Swearing Sammy. But I thought that was too long of a title. I'm dead serious. I almost called it that, but I thought I thought Sega CD Summer was more succinct, so that's what I went with. It definitely is, and it is definitely the right title for this book. There's no question about it. I don't know how you do it another way to show just how much baseball is in it, besides maybe putting more baseball on the cover. I don't know how to fix that.
You'd have to go
problem.
almost Kubrickian with it and get to Doctor Strangelove colon, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Like, you'd have to have this whole just gigantic title,
just this huge subtitle on the internet.
Yeah.
And like I said, that original title, I wouldn't say it was the original title. The original title was Sega CD Summer. After it was written, and once the Swearing Sammy character really kind of, because those scenes were fun to write with that character, then I'm like, well, maybe you could put that in, but I'm just like, that's so long. That's just so long. And so I just kept with the original title.
And
what was go ahead, Chris, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, like, that when you come up with something as succinct and memorable as Sega CD Summer, like, you just kind of have to use it. Like, no matter how, it even if it isn't the most descriptive of what's actually in the book, like, it's fun to say. Sega CD Summer, it works. You would have been a fool not to call the book that.
Well, and just fair warning again for anybody listening to this podcast. Yes, there is lots of baseball in there. If you don't like baseball at all, if baseball is a non-entity, a thing that you're not interested in all, this probably is not going to be the book for you. Because yes, it does talk about Star Wars. It does talk about G.I. Joe. It does talk about newspaper routes, and it does talk a lot about video games. But you're going to have to suffer through a lot of baseball scenes. And if that's not your bag, it's just not going to be a thing for you. But hey, you know what? If you want to, go to SegaCDSummer.com, and then you can read more about it and maybe find out for yourself.
And I think even if you're not into baseball, it's exciting enough that you'd want to.
I'm encouraged by what you said, Chris. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No.
I'm encouraged by what you said, that you're not necessarily a huge baseball fan, but you were able to get invested into the character and what his goals were and how that tournament kind of played out. Because that does tell me that, yes, it does have a lot of baseball in it, but I was still able to do my job as far as getting you invested in the character. So that makes me feel good.
And it really does. It has a lot to do with the feeling of being alive at that time. And you can tell that in this town, baseball was just so incredibly important. So even if baseball isn't your thing, there's this connect there. And I'm not trying to like sound like a suck up or kiss your ass or anything. I was just genuinely impressed with how the stuff that you wrote made me feel like that time, like the conversations that the kids would have about their various video games they're playing, and the feeling of being a Star Wars fan but having a Sega Genesis and being jealous of something that was on the Super Nintendo, and doing the paper route and seeing movies and the way you would talk about seeing movies with the parents and stuff. There's a lot of the book that, for somebody like me that doesn't read a lot of books, felt very disjointed, going from chapter to chapter, being like, this one's baseball, and now this guy's trying to convince you that there are velociraptor eggs in his shed. And like, it was that part, sort of the middle of the book, for somebody who doesn't do a lot of reading and reads very slowly, did get difficult for me to stick with. But the overall feeling of it, just, you conveyed the feeling of being alive during that time so well that even when there were small parts of the book that I wasn't enjoying, it kept me going through to just, and I was rooting for the main character too, enough that I just really wanted to know what was going to happen next. And that's the best praise that I can give the book, is that even if it's not all solely about, like, I was a Nintendo kid, I'm not a huge Sega CD kid, so you would think this is a book about baseball and paper routes and Sega. I never had a paper route. I don't play baseball, and I'm a Nintendo guy. You would think that this isn't really going to be for me, but even if that subject matter isn't the stuff that you're interested in, if you are a fan of retro games and you grew up during that time period, I think just about anybody could get something out of this book because of that, because of how well you captured the feelings of being alive during that time. And rent.
Yeah, if you're in that 35 to 50.
Oh, God. No, I hate saying that.
It sucks. Oh, it sucks. So one of the things that stood out to me, and being a Cincinnati Reds fan, I am just endlessly curious about your opinion on this. One of the scenes in the book when they go to the local pizza place, and they have the tables named after other players, which I just loved. Like, I remember so vividly as a kid being obsessed with the numbers of my favorite players, right? Being obsessed with the number 33 because as a child, Jose Canseco was my favorite player. He's still my fucking favorite player. Like, whatever. I don't even care. He's a dick, and I love him to pieces. But mostly because of how much of a jerk he is. Especially to Alex Rodriguez, who I also love. Their Twitter war, like, for anybody who doesn't follow Jose Canseco on Twitter, like, every now and again, he will just pop up with, like, good morning to all the wonderful people in the world, except Alex Rodriguez. Like, it's just, for no reason why. I don't know why he hates him so much, but he does. Anyway, completely irrelevant to my question. Do you believe Pete Rose belongs in the Hall of Fame?
Well, I'm biased, so I mean it's got to be the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah, right. He has to be.
That's where he broke the hit record, and you know
he just has to be.
That's what I consider. So, that's my take on it. I don't think it's a question, but
it's
also,
not right. Like, I know Kris doesn't have an opinion
that.
on this, but like,
nope.
But like, just reading that and one of the tables being named after Pete Rose, I was like, I have to find out. Like, do you like, and so your dad being more of a if he's anything like Terry in the book, a purist, had to have loved a guy like Pete Rose.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my dad, obviously, the Big Red Machine was before my time.
Sure.
But, that my dad still has T-shirts from that era. The real
That's
Terry
awesome.
Guggenbiller, if you will, has the World Championship shirts and pennant and all that stuff. So, yeah, he loved Johnny Bench, Pete Rose, Joe Morgan, all those guys.
God damn, I love getting those dudes in the show. I mean, not Pete Rose, because baseball is no fun. Baseball is one of the only entertainment industries, I feel, that continues to shoot themselves in the foot over and over and over again. It's this wild thing that literally no other entertainment medium does. Like with the Aaron Judge home run race that just happened, right? The entire time Aaron Judge is chasing Roger Maris's record, the conversation was not about the spectacular season that Aaron Judge was having, or the fact that it's just kind of wild that the American League home run record has been held by 3 right fielders for the New York Yankees. There was like some discussion on like, 61 years on the 61st day, whatever. The entire conversation was about whether or not 73 is the actual home run record. So instead of reveling in this marvelous season, it was like, hey guys, remember? People did steroids. Our sport is stupid. And it's just like, God, fuck, why? Why do we do this? I felt so much reading through this as a diehard baseball fan, as somebody who just genuinely loves the game and is passionate about the game, and could feel that same level of energy and passion from the family and the kids. Like, it always brings me back to that question too. Like, why do we do this? Why do we shoot ourselves in the foot all the time? The NFL, they're like, a bunch of our Hall of Famers were on coke the whole time. We don't care. They were awesome. It's just this weird thing.
Yeah,
Man.
it's so tough, man. Baseball is just in general, it is such a great sport, and I know a lot of people don't like watching it on TV, but that's never been a problem for me. I love watching on TV, love playing it, love listening to it on the radio. But boy, it's you're absolutely right. Like, as the years get longer and longer, it is so difficult to just kind of get into it and follow it, because they just, like you said, shoot themselves in the foot constantly all the time.
Ugh.
And the other leagues are able to grow their fan bases and respect their games, and baseball just cannot seem to do it. Get it together.
They just can't. And like, a part of it, obviously the major flaw with baseball is that if I am wanting to watch Mike Trout, right, arguably the greatest player of his generation, the greatest player of the last 2 or 3 generations. But I mean, Griffey certainly has an argument, A-Rod, but whatever. There's a good chance that I will see Mike Trout get up to the plate 3 times in a game. Whereas if I'm watching football, you know, I'm in South Jersey just like Kris, and the Eagles undefeated. I hate the fucking Eagles. But you know, like their quarterback, Jalen Hurts, he's involved every play, right? Every single play. If I want to watch, you know, I don't know, growing up in Indianapolis, like college basketball or professional basketball is more popular there. I mean, the East Coaster in me is like, well, I've seen Hoosiers, so that must mean all of you like college basketball.
Indiana University basketball, Purdue University basketball, definitely huge here. We've got the Indiana Pacers, but
oh God, I forgot.
Yeah, they exist. They used to have Reggie Miller years ago.
They did.
They've not been great for a while. They're in a full tank right now, so that's great.
Oh God, I totally forgot they existed. But even when Reggie Miller was playing, like if I'm watching a basketball game, Reggie Miller is on the court for, you know, 30 of the 48 minutes. He's got the ball in his hands. That's one of the inherent problems with baseball is that the stars just they're not always involved in the action.
Yeah. They only pop up every few innings when, you know, either maybe they'll make a defensive play, but you're really there to see them hit. So they're only going to hit, you know, every 8 batters or so.
Yeah, and we do it, like I'm involved. Baseball does a terrible job of marketing their pitchers apart from Shohei. But that's only because he hits.
And that's because he's a two-way player.
That's right. Ah, man. Fucking bait. Anyway, sorry, that went off on a tangent. This blew me away too. Because my parents called every video game that I ever played, whether it was on the Nintendo or the TurboGrafx or whatever, they were all just Nintendo games. Did your dad legitimately call them videos, or was that just something made up for the book?
100% true. Yes.
That's wild. Why?
I guess because you plugged it into the TV and it played video, I guess. I don't know. It didn't matter. We used to have an Intellivision, which was a system that none of my friends thought actually existed. And
sure.
from everything, from Intellivision on through, you know, the Nintendo Switch games that my nephew plays, you know, my dad's always like, oh, you guys playing videos? Like, no, we're playing video games, man. But that's just how it's been since I've been alive for 42 years. It's been videos.
Awesome. Did anyone like ever try to correct, like, Dad, look, we got to have a conversation about this? Because I
think at some point we tried to explain that, you know, if you just wanted to call it Nintendo, that would be okay. We would be even okay if you would call playing Sega, playing Nintendo, or playing Xbox, playing Nintendo. We could live with that. But this sort of just videos that is inaccurate, non-descriptive, it's just what it is, you know. It's just one of those things. You're just never going to get past that.
I mean, like, theoretically, he was correct, because unless I'm mistaken, the Make My Video series was relatively popular.
God, make it
speaking on the Sega CD. So, like, that, yes, Dad, we were playing videos. Like, legitimately, we were playing the Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. But
man, that's how the book should have ended. Now that I realize that last chapter should have been about Make My Video, and we could have just come full circle with that. See, that's why sometimes you need an editor on these things.
Oh man, unsolicited advice for no charge, man. I am here for you, whatever you need.
I cannot believe those were a thing.
There were 4. There's Marky Mark, NXS, Crisscross, and CNC Music Factory.
Oh, well, how can you deny the magic that is CNC Music Factory and Crisscross? Dear God, there was like 3 days where everybody in my elementary school wore their clothes backwards, and the principal basically came out in an assembly and was like, fucking stop it. And we all went, oh, okay, sorry.
I can tell you that I wrote a few different blog posts about the book, and one of them I did was about full motion video games for the Sega CD, which gets a bad reputation, deservedly so, because they're terrible. But I found a Let's Play of the Marky Mark Make My Video.
Oh God!
And I could not figure out what the hell was going on in the Let's Play. Like, they're just clicking on videos, and they're like, oh, yeah, now you're just making a video. I'm like, what is happening here? I have no idea. And like you said, they made 4 of those things.
Oh, my
Unbelievable.
God. How did it, and why those 4? Why those 4 in particular?
They
Versus,
must have just been who they had access to. I actually have the crisscross one. I was like, I know I have one of these.
That's
things,
not surprising.
And when crisscross was a thing, because I spell my name with a K, of course everyone's like, oh, you must love crisscross. It was like that freaking.
Oh man, I didn't even think about that.
It was like in Office Space when everyone was like, "Oh, you celebrate his entire catalog." Was Michael Bolton?
Michael Bolton.
That's right.
Yeah, it was like that with me. Everyone was like, "Oh, you must love crisscross." Like, no,
I don't know if it had anything to do with it. I know that the Marky Mark one was made by Sony Interactive Entertainment, and so I don't know if that was also a music label that they had, and maybe that's why. That was one of the games or one of the artists that they chose. But
that makes the most sense to me. They were probably just all under the same
artist in the loosest sense of the word.
Sense, yes,
he is the worst. I will say though, not for nothing, Crisscross, I Missed the Bus. That was my favorite track of theirs off of their seminal Jump record. I identified way more with I Missed the Bus because there were a couple times that I did in fact miss the bus in elementary and middle school.
Well, poor Tommy Guggenbiller, much like myself, grew up on the country western music of the 90s, so I really didn't have any idea who any of those people were when those games were out.
That was actually one of my next questions, right? Because I find, if we're being honest, and we're all friends here, I see no reason to lie to each other, I find that early 90s country music to be just among the worst stuff ever recorded. I hate it with the passion of 1,000 burning suns. But old country, all about it. Like old Johnny Cash, old Merle Haggard, Hank Williams, not the second or the third, but old Hank, love it. Dolly Parton, fucking great. Did any of that country music stuff rub off on you? Do you find yourself nostalgic for that or listening to it now?
I had a cowboy boot phase in the 7th grade.
I mean, a lot of people did. We're not going to hold that against you.
I mean, again, we're talking about a rural area out in a county school. And so we had a lot of farm kids. We had a cornfield right behind my house, even though we weren't farmers. So country music was pretty big when I was a kid. I don't really listen to a whole ton of music much anymore. That's a real big kind of cultural blind spot for me, to be perfectly honest, a pop cultural blind spot for me. But on occasion, if I'm on Spotify or something and I see a 90s playlist, I might listen to a couple of songs and think, oh yeah, I think Dad had that tape, that sort of thing.
Some Travis Tritt.
Travis Tritt, Alan Jackson, Clint Black, Ricky Van Shelton. You had Garth Brooks back then, who was huge. Garth's still pretty good, I think, but boy, whew, there was a lot. It was a lot, and we had CMT on cable, country music television. So not only did we get to hear the music, we got to see the 1990s music videos as well, and they were just phenomenal.
By far, in my opinion, the greatest country music video of all time is the Kenny Rogers Space Cowboy music video, or Cowboys from Space, or something like that shit. It is banana sandwich. It is the weirdest Kenny Rogers song that I think has ever existed. And the video was these weird galactic rangers, bad 70s sci-fi, Star Trek, phasing in and out of the fucking screen. Nuts. Absolutely nuts. I don't really know where you go from there. I had to mention. I can't.
No,
am I the only one who has seen this?
It exists because if you do a search here on YouTube, you do get Kenny Rogers' Planet Texas.
Planet Texas, that's what it is.
Thing
yes,
that comes up. Yeah, says it was from 1989. So it
Planet
was
Texas.
Nominated for the Academy of Country Music Award Video of the Year. So there you go. You got great taste.
I mean, it is. It's man, it's something. Oh boy, dear God. Speaking of the conversations that were in the book, one of the things that I thought was quite funny, because Kris and we've done one or two on the podcast, and I think it's a good idea that we should get back to at some point, our Stone Age Gamer casting couch, where we like throw it's nowhere near as sexy as it sounds, where we throw out our ideas for who should be in like video game movies and whatnot. But you said in the book, being young men at the time, having no idea who should play Mara Jade in a Star Wars movie. I have to imagine you've thought about that since then and have someone that you think would have been or would be now good for the role.
Oh, goodness gracious.
No?
I still
totally
have
wrong?
no idea who would be good for Mara Jade.
Kris?
I got nothing. I'm not very good at this casting couch thing.
How dare you? Everything we do on this podcast is gold, Kris.
Everything you do on this podcast is gold. I'm just here.
I would have said
up.
maybe a few years ago, maybe Bryce Dallas Howard, but I don't think so now.
I could see that. I don't really have a good suggestion because I am not deep into the periphery of Star Wars, as it appears the two of you are. Like, I like the trilogy, and the sequels were good, and the prequels were terrible. Except I do like Star Wars Episode 2 because Yoda fights. It was the first time, and it was dope. I don't care what Kris does.
Yeah, we've had words about that.
Yeah,
wow.
It was
I have deep feelings on that scene.
So do you guys usually record this podcast by remote, right?
Yeah.
Is that so that you don't have any physical altercations during the podcast?
No,
yeah.
we're just
It's mostly because I would win, and I think Kris would cop to that as well.
Oh, without a doubt. It's not much of a contest there. It's just a matter of fact, but it's really more geography than anything. I'm fine with having happy disagreements. That's my other thing. I'm all about happy disagreements. I said something nice on Twitter last night about Attack of the Clones. As a matter of fact, somebody posted something, and I was like, I genuinely don't like this movie, but credit where credit's due. The stuff it did well, it did really well, and I'm glad you enjoy it. That wasn't so hard.
Nah,
yeah, I wish
more
people took that tact on things sometimes. Like, just because somebody likes something maybe you don't like, you don't necessarily need to point out that you don't like that thing. It's okay, especially we're not talking about your friends, you know. Okay, yeah, you're gonna go back and forth on things, but like if it's just some random guy on Twitter, you don't need to say, hey, that thing you liked, it sucks, man.
Yeah, and
it's
that's the big difference. Like, you can say you didn't like it, but you don't have to say it sucks.
Yeah.
Like, I think it sucks, but that doesn't mean it objectively does. In my opinion, I don't enjoy it. But good for you for enjoying it. That's totally fine. And I've been trying to make a concerted effort to do that as often as possible this year. When something happens or I watch something that I genuinely don't like, I don't want to jump online and say, this thing sucks. I want to say I didn't like it because I'm very interested in those conversations of like, oh, you thought this was great? I'm curious why. Maybe there's something I missed, because I've been wrong about so much stuff. Like, I'm not always right about things that are genuinely good. There are things that I've missed because I've thought of them one way, and then somebody convinced me to watch it again from a different perspective, and I did, and I thought it was really cool. And heck, I was a staunch defender of the prequels for the longest time, and I think they're genuinely not very good, but that's me. That's my opinion. And bless people who think otherwise. I will never understand it. We learn, we grow, and just be excellent to each other.
Hey, I saw The Phantom Menace 9 times at the theater when it came out.
Oof.
That was my senior year of high school. So,
Wow.
or the summer after my senior year of high school. So,
God, I don't remember my number, but it was close. It was up there. It was about 9 myself.
You know,
That
they had
movie's
Pizza
so
Hut
much
boxes
fun.
and KFC buckets and just Star Wars was everywhere and I was in heaven. And, you know, then in retrospect, you're like, you know, maybe that wasn't quite as good as I remember it being.
But
I saw
you
one
still got
time.
to see Duel of Fates 9 times on a big movie theater screen.
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah.
you couldn't watch that at home the way you can now. You know, you brought that home on the VHS tape and it was all pan and scan. Like, that movie's got a ton of faults, but seeing that over and over in the theater, that was an experience, man. That movie still looks good. And
Yeah, that last lightsaber fight is great. I love the sort of Return of the Jedi-ish cut between, you know, 3 different action scenes there at the end and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's got some stuff going for it.
And we're still using
But,
practical effects, which is
yes.
one of the reasons it's not hard to look at. Like a lot of Attack of the Clones is, I find personally difficult to look at because it's all fake. Nobody was anywhere. There
Say,
are no
give us a
sets.
real clone trooper uniform for once, can
I
you?
can't believe that they didn't. What the hell? They CG'd all the. Why? That's not hard. You did it in the 70s. What is wrong with you people?
But we didn't have to anymore. See, that's the thing about episode 2. I have not seen that movie in probably 15 years. And I don't think I'm ever going to watch it again. Because I don't want to not like it as much as I currently do enjoy the theoretical memory that I have of. I
You
don't
remember
want it
in
to be
Obi-Wan where
tarnished.
that one like homeless clone trooper was there and it was like an actual suit? I was like, wow. I think that's the first
So
time
They
there's
do
been,
exist.
like the M&Ms and Santa Claus in that commercial. But yeah, it was so cool to see a real clone trooper. That shouldn't be a thing. I shouldn't be that impressed by seeing a real clone trooper, yet here we are. I think that's the first time that ever actually happened. Wild.
So, out of curiosity, one of the things, one of the chapters, there was a discussion about bloodlines, between the group of friends, right? Castlevania bloodlines.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
Is that your favorite Castlevania, or like what is your favorite Castlevania? Because I feel like that's an important retro gaming question, right?
It probably is because I've played the NES Castlevania. I've played what is it, Super Castlevania for the Super Nintendo, or is it Castlevania 4? I don't remember.
Super Castlevania 4. Yeah.
Okay, Super Castlevania 4.
It's all of those.
So it is all of them. Very good.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I've played Bloodlines and I've played Symphony of the Night. So probably, but I didn't make it very far in Symphony of the Night. So, and I had a college friend who was obsessed with that game. So it kind of took a little bit of the luster off of that one for me. So, yeah, I'd probably say Bloodlines is probably my favorite of the Castlevania games.
Well, I mean, if you're looking for more recommendations, I know these two guys who do a podcast where they ranked all of the Castlevania games.
Yeah, you guys did do that recently, and I also
We
enjoyed.
did.
You guys ranked. Did you do the Ghouls and Ghosts and Goblins? Was
Yeah,
that a
we just
recent
did
one?
that pretty
Yeah,
recently.
I thought you did.
That was a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that was fun to listen to.
Oh, thank you.
One
Yeah, I
of
like
these
those
days, we'll
ranking
get around
episodes.
to ranking all the Star Wars games, and it'll be a 13-part episode.
I say, yeah. You'll need to do a
Be-
complete retrospective. That'll take you 3 years to get through.
Remember when the first Force Unleashed came out, I think is when it was, GameTrailers.com did a Star Wars video game retrospective that was so fascinating. It was just a bunch of Star Wars games I hadn't really heard of and seen in motion, and like it's such a fun retrospective to go back and watch, even though it's, you know, terribly outdated. It just covers all this the classic Star Wars games that you know, some of them I didn't know existed back then, and like a bunch of the PC games. It's a really, really cool thing. I'm sure you can still find it on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah, but the problem with it is that since then they have made 655 Star Wars games, so it's got a little bit of catch up to do there.
Watching the ones about the old ones, though, that's where it's really at. I remember I got I didn't know there were any Star Wars games on the Atari 2600 when I was a kid, and I was working at Funcoland, and somebody gave me a bunch of loose Atari carts, and one of them didn't have a label on it. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to find. I love getting these games that don't have labels. You never know what it's going to be. And I plugged it in, and like I pressed the reset button, and the Atari starts playing the Star Wars theme. I was like, oh my god, it's a Star Wars game. This is amazing. It was a Empire Strikes Back one where you're just fighting the AT-ATs on Hoth infinitely, and it's like, well, this is freaking great. I love that game.
I actually really like of course, I mean, how many games have had a Battle of Hoth level, but I actually did like the Battle of Hoth level on the Empire Strikes Back Nintendo game, the one for the NES. I thought that was a pretty cool level. The rest of the game is I think those games might be harder than the Super Star Wars games. The Star Wars one that came out for the NES, and then the Empire Strikes Back, and then there was never a Return of the Jedi game for the NES, but gosh, that Empire Strikes Back game was just, the Dagobah level and beyond was just really tough.
I never got anywhere in it. I've never gotten really much of anywhere in either of the NES games. And I've put some time into trying to play through the Super NES ones, but it's one of those things I feel like I should do at some point, but I never enjoyed myself playing them enough to really put the time into properly finishing them off.
Really, and I think Dan would agree with me here that you should really just put your effort toward playing Knights of the Old Republic.
100%.
Instead of, wasting your time with trying to ease your way through these Super Star Wars games.
Yeah, I mean,
my video game time is limited at best, and I am very excited for that remake. Like, I will play through that game again.
Be interesting to see if they update. I mean, that's the thing. It is a great game. It does take, probably, 30, 40 hours to get through. Maybe not quite that long, but it's a long one. And because it's a kind of like a borrowware type of game. And it'd be interesting to see if they update the combat system, because it is not an action RPG, which is, kind of the thing that most of these games seem to be these days. And I don't know if they're going to kind of update the combat system for that, or if they'll kind of keep with that turn-based stuff that they had, back when it was released.
It was really, really good. It played really, really well. It's great.
Okay. I don't know why I'm so reluctant to play this dang game. I always have been. I even bought it on the freaking Xbox back in the day, and I never got around to playing it. But I'm working
on... My boss at Game Crazy got fired because he played that game too much instead of working. Oh, Annabelle, that poor guy.
Oh my god, case. I forgot about that guy.
Yeah, poor dude. But yeah. So, are you a modern gamer at all, Matt, or do you?
You said you like Xbox, but what do you do?
I have an Xbox Series X that I somehow got back in 2020 by a fluke, and that was when they can still be challenging to get, but back in 2020 it was really, really hard. And I was just like, how hard is it to get one of these? So I logged on to bestbuy.com one day, and it just kind of like happened. I got one. I'm like,
not hard at all, apparently.
I guess I'll have to just go ahead and buy this. I'm sorry, honey, but I'll go ahead and get this. And so yeah, I play. I still play. I don't play as much as I used to. Probably the thing I played most recently was just a couple of months ago. I spent a while going through the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. So. I was going to get Gotham Knights because I like the Arkham games, but some of the reviews kind of put me off of that. So I don't know if I'll end up playing that or not unless I see it really get discounted. I'd like to get the new NBA 2K game mostly because of not the microtransactions that are going to suck the fun out of the My Career mode, but I really like, they've done a thing with, there's different NBA eras that you can play as, like 70s NBA, 80s NBA, the Kobe Bryant era NBA, modern NBA, and they've changed like the graphics packages and like the presentation, and they've got a lot of the old school players on it. So I will probably at some point get that and play that. So yeah, I'm not the most dedicated modern gamer, but I definitely do still play video games.
Do you dabble into the retro stuff? Like, do you find yourself going back to those things, or do you just? I got
I did not get the second version of it, but I got the original Sega Genesis Mini, and then I cracked it and filled it, with like 150 games or whatever.
Nice.
And I do pull that out every, couple times a month usually and play some stuff.
Nice.
With the Retrobit 6-button controllers, which are terrific.
They are. And
Is
available
there
at Stone Age Gamer.
That's right.
I'm sorry?
Plug.
I said they're available at Stone Age Gamer as well.
Oh, yes, they are.
Is there a big retro scene in Indiana?
I'm going to try to be looking for it because those are the people I need to buy my book.
Yeah, like we know some people in Ohio, and there's a decent retro scene out there. That's really as far west as we go, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Stone Age Gamer store is in Ohio.
Right.
Yeah,
do we have, who's in Nebraska? We have Nebraska people, don't we? It's part of the Geek Aid podcast network? Or am I just totally making that up?
Is that where where's Weekend Rental?
Is that where the Weekend Rental guys are? God, I feel bad. I should know that off the top of my head.
I should too, but I'm bad at geography and everything else, so they'll have to forgive me, but maybe.
I think we've discussed Nebraska, but I don't know what it's like, because like out here on the East Coast, retro gaming has it's stupid. It's stupid. It's not fun to be involved in anymore. My opinion, but it's just like everything's so crazy overpriced, and like not because of inflation or any of that nonsense. Like this has been going on in the retro gaming community for like a decade plus now at this point. But I always wonder, being the coastal elite that I am, how things in the Midwest fare.
Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that those of us in Indiana just aren't playing, that we actually moved on to Xbox and N64 and PlayStations, because you would think the way the Midwest works, we're usually behind the trends. So, when something is trendy in New York, it comes to us about, 8 years later. So, that's kind of the way it is being here in Indiana. But,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like, you guys wait for the Vita. Oh, my God, that thing's amazing. You don't even know.
Yeah, we're still waiting for the Jaguar. Really getting that 64 bits of power after that, if you do the math. So,
because I know there's a decent scene like in Chicago as well. Like I said earlier in the podcast, like I know 3 Floyds. That's about what I know about Indiana. But Chicago, I know there's a decent scene and like some conventions and stuff out there. But I don't know. I was just really curious as to how these things kind of translate. Because
there are a few retro game stores around here. There's actually a retro game store, not in my hometown of Williamsburg, which has nothing, by the way, just in general. But in Richmond, Indiana, that's the biggest city near us, and there is a retro game store there. So I'm going to try to get in contact with those people, set up like a book signing, something like that, so I can try to get out and sell some copies, that sort of thing. But yeah, not a huge. I've heard Columbus, Ohio's got a decent scene over there, and that's about the extent of my knowledge on that.
Yeah, we've definitely got some listeners in that area in Ohio that I'm sure once they listen to this episode will respond in the Discord and be like, "How the fuck did you not remember exactly where I live?" Because I'm a bad host. Is really the answer to that question. But, hopefully if you can make your way out there, like I know we'll at least have a couple people out that way that can, point you in the right direction and maybe try and bump some sales up for you as well.
Yeah, because that's really the next thing. I mean, obviously it's easy to sell to friends, family. Sure. I mean, those people are going to buy your book, so there you've sold a dozen. But the only way you're going to really ever grow a fan base or make any financial gain from something like this is you've got to try to find an audience that is outside of people that so that means going to area bookstores. We've got a couple of barcades around here. I don't know if that's something that would be good or not to go out to one of those places, but kind of staying here regional in the state of Indiana first, and then if anybody would like to invite me to come out, I'll be more than happy to, if it's within decent driving distance.
There you go. Kris, get Ryan to front him some tickets. Ryan
how
doesn't
much,
listen to me for anything, so I just throw out wild suggestions for Ryan to do.
How much does it take for something like this to become profitable? Like you said, you self-published this book. What's that process like? How do you get a book printed, and how long would it take for you to consider this book to be a successful for you?
Well, to take you a little bit behind the scenes here, I'll try to keep it as succinct as possible. This book I did completely off the Amazon platform. So Amazon is responsible for, I did the cover design, I laid out the book, I did the copy editing, so typos, those are all 100% me. But Amazon prints these books on demand through their, it used to be called Create Space, but it's pretty much just called a Kindle digital platform, I think now. And so when people order the book off Amazon, Amazon prints that, and then with the retail price, they take a cut of that, and then they give me a cut of that, and then they also subtract the printing costs from that as well. So for a physical copy of this book, I make about $3.41 for the print version of the book. Now, the Kindle version and the retail price of the print book on Amazon right now is $12.99. For the Kindle version, the electronic, the ebook version, that price is $2.99 for that version, and I get about $2.10 per version of that is sold, because there is no print of that. There is no physical copy that Amazon has to print and then, pass the print cost off to me. So I didn't really put up a lot of money up front to get this book published, because a lot of that stuff just comes off the back end there on Amazon when you upload your book. And then, I do have to do some things, like in order to have author copies. I had 50 of the copies of the book here shipped to my house here in Indianapolis, and that cost about $260 to have those 50 copies printed. So if I sold those copies at $20 each, I'd have to sell about 13 of them to cover my print costs. So that kind of gives you, if I can sell 13 of these books at $20 each, and probably will not sell them for $20, but if I did, just to keep the math easy, that would then recoup my shipping costs, and then any book I sold after 13 would just be pure, profit that I would make off of that book. So you do that math there. And then, you got some other hidden costs. Like, this is not a knock on you guys at all. I'm glad you wanted physical copies of the book, but those had to be ordered. I had to order author copies of those that were like $4.50. But then it was because I wanted to send them to you quickly, so I did send them through UPS. That cost about $14 in shipping for those books each. So you've got some sunk costs there. So if anybody else wants a preview version or a physical copy of the book, not necessarily a PDF, to read the book, then you've got that shipping cost to figure in as well. So as I talk about that and stuff, you can see that the costs add up a little bit there, and you do have to move a few copies in order for you to just cover your initial setup stuff, and then after that, then you can start, making some money off some royalties and that sort of thing.
Are you planning on doing an audiobook version?
I am, yes. I've gotten a couple of people ask me about that, and I have zero experience with putting an audio version together. But I also had zero experience about laying out my own book. So I figured that out to a decent amount where it looks not terrible. So I actually was talking to one of my friends the other day, and he said, "You know what? The voice in the book is so distinctly yours." Of course, this is someone I grew up with, so they're a little biased on this. They said, "You should just go ahead and record the chapters and read it yourself and do that." I'm like, "Well, guys, I'm not really a voice actor. I don't know if that's a great idea or not, but it's something I'm considering doing." Maybe reading a couple chapters here and there a day and trying to put that together as an audio book. If not, then you can contract that out and pay a voice actor to, not a voice actor, but, somebody who does that professionally to read your book. And I have zero idea, because it's not anything I explored yet, on how much that would cost.
Well, I mean, if you want to find more information about it, an old friend of mine that's what he does. He's a voice actor / does audiobooks for a living. We had him on the show a while back. His name's Jim Yamaguchi. He's an excellent guy. So if you want me to ever put you in contact with him, I'd be happy to. He could, at the very least, answer some questions.
Yeah, that would be, because that's something I'm reasonably confident with print publishing. I've done a lot of stuff with that, with small press and some independent stuff here and there. So I'm comfortable in that, but audiobook is kind of a Rubik's Cube to me right now. But I'm willing to learn.
I mean, we did audiobook versions like a bunch of schmucks and just decided on a whim that we were going to read the Nintendo Worlds of Power books. And we have got, how many did we end up doing, Chris? I did Metal Gear Solid.
Jeez, I did Ninja Gaiden.
You did Mega Man 2 and Ninja Gaiden.
Blaster Master.
Did you do Wizards and Warriors?
Somebody had started Wizards and Warriors, but I don't think that one ever got finished.
Yeah, we had a lot of good ideas back in the day that didn't get all the way done.
I have almost all the books. I think the only one I'm missing is Shadowgate and Basis Loaded are the only two I'm missing.
Yeah, suffice it to say, it was a relatively, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, a relatively easy thing to do. We sat here and read and hit stop every chapter and uploaded it to the website. And I don't know that it was the most professional quality, but it got done.
Well, I mean, there was some editing involved on our parts, like me and Evan sat through, and everything would take multiple takes. You wouldn't just nail it 100%, on the first go around.
Well,
but
maybe you did.
One take Dan, right?
That's right. Damn it, Metal Gear Solid, or not Metal Gear Solid, just Metal Gear, reading through that book and getting it that, and that ended up on YouTube and we kind of grew some of the audience that way. So definitely, I mean, what do I... Sorry, I've been drinking. I'm tired.
Yeah, we've
lost
been,
my train of thought there.
Chatting for quite some time. So, were there any other major things you wanted to talk to us about before we start wrapping this up?
Oh no! I've really enjoyed the conversation this evening. I did not expect that we would go on here for nearly 2 hours, but you know what? That's good. You guys are easy to talk to. You've got a good rapport. And you do a good job of making your guests feel comfortable. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much. All right. Well, we do have one question we ask of all of our guests. It's a very important question. And that is, what bread is the best bread?
Wonder Bread.
Okay. All right.
Wow. Not even a hesitation.
Yeah.
And I like
didn't
it.
Really have to
committed.
think about it.
100%.
And I can respect that. It's a versatile bread. It's just straight and to the point. It's like, no, this is bread. This is what you're getting. Put a sandwich
and also,
on it.
That's the first one that came to mind. So a little behind the curtain there for you.
We've had some pretty wild answers with that question, and that's a good one.
We either are Italian or have grown up around a bunch of Italians, and those fuckers take their bread very seriously. So it's it's a Jersey thing.
All right. Well, thanks for talking to us. This was Matt Adams, the author of Sega CD Summer. You can check out, what is it, just SegaCDSummer.com?
SegaCDSummer.com's got all kinds of stuff there if you want to read it, if you care to. If not, also fine.
It redirects, right? Because I'm looking at the site and it says MattAdamsWriter.com.
So yeah. If you go to SegaCDSummer.com, then it redirects you to the Sega CD Summer central page of my website, MattAdamsWriter.com, which will also get you there. All kinds of avenues.
Excellent. All right. We'll include a link to it in the show notes for sure. So yeah, that wraps things up. Thank you very much for joining us, and buy his book.
Damn right. Buy the book.
Buy my book. And all right, and we're back. That was an interview and some commercials. You're welcome.
We're so good.
We're so good.
God
damn, we're good at this.
Damn good, bloody good, damn good job.
No, that was a fun interview. He's a nice guy to talk about.
talk about.
He didn't
talk
hesitate
to,
at all
one.
on the Wonder Bread. I mean, I can't say
that was right there.
Can't say I agree, but I respect it. It's a respectable choice.
'Twas indeed a respectable choice.
Oh my goodness. So, yeah. Go buy Sega CD Summer. It's a good book. And this dude deserves book money.
Yeah, throw some money his way.
Yeah.
It's a recession.
Honestly, this is seems
Inflation
like a
sucks.
pretty good holiday gift, which I guess reminds me, is that cool with you, the idea?
Oh, for sure. I'll whip together a list. You know me.
I do know you. We talk every week.
I'll whip this out.
Wave it around.
Swing it at you. Put it right in your face. What?
He's talking about books.
So,
I hope he's talking about books.
no, I don't.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm ready for bed. This was fun though. Matt Adams seems like a real nice guy, and he wrote himself a heck of a good book. And
Yeah,
I
buy his
recommend
book.
it. Buy my book.
Do it.
All right. Well, you got anything else?
No, I'm out.
All right, then. That is our show. Join us next week when we will be cooking up a sort of holiday gift guide. Do you have retro gamers in your life that you need to shop for, or are you a retro gamer yourself looking for cool gift ideas for your own Christmas list? Hopefully, Dan and I can come up with some nifty ideas to help you all out. Anyways,
I'm just going to say buy Ragnarok, but that doesn't really help with the retro.
I mean, nobody needs to buy it for you. You'll have it already.
I will be playing it while we are recording.
We are on most social media platforms, and if you want to get in touch with us, we aren't very difficult to find. All it takes is a quick look at our show notes, and you'll see links to our social media accounts, as well as all manner of other fun stuff, like a link to our namesake, StoneAgeGamer.com, and the more useful links than you can shake a joystick at. If you'd like to get early access to this show's episodes, as well as a bevy of other shows on the Geekade Podcast Network, check out our Patreon, also linked to in the show notes. It helps keep the show running week after week, and all our patrons are loved and appreciated. This show's theme song, Squared Roots, was written by Banjo Guy Ollie. You can learn all about his wonderful music and more by following the link to his YouTube channel, also in the show notes. And finally, as always, we'd like to thank our intrepid editor, Evan, for making the show listenable for all you folks, and we'd like to thank all you folks for listening in the first place. That is it, everybody. On behalf of Dan and myself, keep playing games.